Hello, violinists! As an instrument, the violin is one of the most akin to the human voice, and this is because some of the qualities that you can get from using the bow. Many instruments, such as the guitar or the piano, have plucked strings or strings that you hit, and so the attack of the string is what makes the string reverberate, and then it keeps reverberating until it dies out or is muted. The violin, however, continues to have that same amount of attack throughout because of the way that you use your bow. And while that sounds all well and good, I'm sure that you know, if you're a beginner violinist, that when you start out, the bow doesn't quite sound as smooth as the human voice. So here is one really important technique to make sure that you get to increase the fluidity of your playing, and that is using your wrist properly. Now, when you're beginning with the violin and the bow does not quite yet feel natural in your hand, the tendency is to just move it back and forwards as you imagine you're supposed to do. In reality, the bow should become much more fluid than this, and your bow hold should be extraordinarily fluid, allowing you to move the bow softly and smoothly. And one of the best tricks for getting this soft, smooth bow hold is by moving your wrist at the beginning and end of the bow almost as you would an elastic cord. So instead of sawing back and forth on the strings like this with your arm locked in position and your bow hold nice and neat as your teacher told you, right? That's a very common kind of method of bowing I see from beginner violin students. Instead, you want to move your wrist up as you move the bow up, and then down as you move the bow down towards the end of the bow. So in the middle of the bow, your wrist should be about centered. Moving up, it'll come up before changing directions. Okay, and this creates elasticity when you change the direction of your bow. It's a subtle movement and you don't want to overdo it. The point is to get rid of that rigid, locked feeling in your arm that is created by a locked wrist. After a while, this will start to feel much more natural as well, because you move as the joints in your body naturally move. When you move around life and you do actions that are familiar to you, you usually do them softly, right? You don't walk around like this, right? You don't walk around with your joints all locked and frozen into position. When you're tying your shoes or when you're brushing your teeth, even when you brush your teeth, I don't imagine you just go like this, right? Your wrist is moving as well with the motion. So a similar kind of theory must be applied to the bow, this kind of relaxed, natural feeling. And you'll find that you'll start to look much more natural when you apply this soft wrist bowing technique as well. You'll start to look like a much more professional player rather than a robot. Okay. So to practice this, first of all, we must practice it on all of the strings. So let's start on the G string and just go backwards and forwards. Try first small bows in the middle, okay, and then try from the middle to the tip and back to the middle again, so just the upper half of your bow. Then try the lower half of your bow, and then try whole bows, all the while maintaining that elasticity in your wrist. Exercises, try and notice at different points in the bow how the elasticity changes. Is it more or less in the middle, more or less at the top, at the bottom that you move your wrist? So I notice when I do it that in the middle of the bow I have to use less elasticity with the wrist, but at the top of the bow I use quite a bit. I really get that bend in there. And at the bottom you're not bending so much. At the bottom you're just moving just a little bit, very, very subtle with the wrist to allow the bow to come to the very end and then push it back up. So experiment with this technique, try it on all of your strings, start to create that fluid sound that you hear amongst professional players, and let me know how it goes in the comments below.